Lift and shift, again, I always like to say the easy explanation of lift and shift is I got data at point A and I want to get it to point B. Easy way to configure. The other key is it's an automated way of doing it. We've got a wizard, which I'll give you a quick video on, that'll configure this entire lift and shift migration of data, builds a NiFi flow for you in the background. You never even have to look at the NiFi stuff at this point, and it'll start moving that data. Okay? If you've got data multiple points around the world, you can set up a lift and shift flow for each one of those. And all 32 of your remote factories can use lift and shift to pick up their IoT data and aggregate it back to a single point where your business analytics people actually have the application and they want all of that data in a single spot that they can use. And this is where usually I'd say, but wait, there's more, but I'll wait till I get there. All right? How does this flow, how does the deployment start to look? Well, even with ultra-fast, and in this scenario, you've got a SoftNAS Platinum node at each endpoint. Okay, the ultra-fast is in those same two nodes. The lift and shift is in those same two nodes. But key point, there is a SoftNAS box, Platinum version at each endpoint, each node. Okay, lift and shift, as mentioned before, can be accelerated with ultra-fast. So if you've got that bad link between where the data is and where you want to get it, ultra-fast can help. If it's Azure East to Azure West, you're going to run the speed test. You can say, I don't need it for that link. You don't use it, okay? Continuous sync is a very key feature, and it's pretty much what you're probably reading into it. It'll continuously sync your data even after it runs. So once you start this lift and shift flow, it starts sending data, possibly across ultra-fast, from wherever the data is, the source volume. That doesn't have to be a SoftNAS. As long as where the data is, where the source data is, can be accessed through NFS or CIFS SMB. All this SoftNAS node is doing is sucking the data off of where the data is. It could be a legacy NAS out there and migrating it over to SoftNAS on the other side. Okay, so it literally is lifting the data, off of a legacy NAS, copying it with this automated flow to the other SoftNAS box in the cloud, and storing it in SoftNAS on the cloud. All right? So if configure sync is set after the first pass of the data, think of this as, I'll use a bad term, it's almost like a batch operation. So we go out and we say, give me all the target files on the source, create a list, copy all those over. Well, the problem is after that first pass has happened, this application is live, it's changed that data. So after the first pass is done, if you've configured continuous sync, we'll actually do a delta lookup and we'll determine what files have changed, and which ones are modified, which ones are new, build up the second rev of the flow or the second iteration of the flow, and we'll send all the delta changes back over.
Does that use ZFS snapshotting?
No.
Okay.
No. This is literally NiFi world that we're in here,
okay. Yeah.
where it's literally a script that says, get file, analyze file, put file, write file.
Yeah.
It's a data pipe that's literally focused on moving the data from point A to point B. But the key is if you configure this continuous sync, this is an automated way until you stop this flow, it'll just sit out there and continually move all of your data from point A to point B until you stop it. Why is that important? Application migration, we'll use this example. I want to move my app to the cloud. Part of what I have to do to move my app to the cloud is I got to get my data there. It's great if I can put the new web app up in the cloud, the new SaaS app, on all the services. My data is still back on-prem, right? So you've got your continuous sync out here running. Your data is being moved. How many people in here have ever been involved with an app migration from one place to another? And you run all your test data on that new application, running great. Then you plug it into the real data, and it falls over, right? The cool part is while this lift and shift is running, you can actually do a writable clone, or a snap clone of the data. Take the application, the new application that you want to use in the cloud, connect it up to that clone. Now you're actually you're testing that new application with pseudo real data. live data. You've got a clone of that data that you can do live testing on a snapshot of the data that was back inside the on-prem, right? While you're testing your data on this clone of the data, the lift and shift continues to run, right? Doing this for 2 weeks. They say, hey, I want a new snapshot of the latest data. You can continually take these clones of the live data that's being migrated and do real data app testing in the cloud, because you've got a copy of it over there at this point. You can take as many of those clones as you want to constantly test. So then you've been running this and you've tested your app and you say, okay, it's running great. It's actually running on the real data as of 3 days ago, right? So you're ready to cut over. First thing you do is you cut the applications off, maintenance window. You have to get a maintenance window in there. And what you want to do is stop pushing data to the source side volume. You have to quiesce, the delta changes. You can then monitor the dashboards inside of SoftNAS to see when that flow is now reporting 0 data, 0 data, 0 data. That now means that all of your data that's on your source has been replicated to the cloud and it's up to date, because it's not finding any changes. You're in the state that you want to be. All my source data is now in the cloud. At that point, you can pause the flow, because it's not going to do anything else, because the application isn't driving any more data changes to the source. I've got a copy of my data over here. You take the application, you route it to point to the new SoftNAS data in the cloud, you bring it back up online, and you've done your application data migration, while you test it along the way with live snapshots of the real data during the migration period itself. And we think this is a really great use case. If you think just even with the continuous sync, if you think about issues like compliance, where I have to keep a copy of data off-site at a different location, you can take the data at the source, kick off this continuous sync, and it's just running in the background, creating a copy of this data. And maybe you want to do that once a day, or maybe you want to, I need that data out there within an hour. There's so many uses you can use this for like application data migration, compliance, keeping a copy of data offsite, where you can easily configure this. DevOps people can do it with the utilities that are part of SoftNAS Platinum and not have to write new code. All right, this is actually a quick video. I'm gonna have to transition to this on setting up lift and shift. All right, this is the admin web console. Lift and shift is actually built right in. So you create a new flow, new lift and shift flow. Give it a name. I'm going to lift and shift from external file server to Azure SoftNAS VM. There is some parts of this that have been edited for the purpose of moving quickly. Pick which cloud you want to go to. In this case, we're going to Azure. We need the credentials for your Azure account, because we're going to be creating storage accounts and things like that for you, and also your SoftNAS credentials for the Azure SoftNAS box. That's what this is doing. For each step where we're asking for data, we do pre-checks.
Then you create all the objects that are required on that side.
Bingo. That's why we need the keys, the credentials, and things like that. So this part, I'm going to just stop for a second. So what we're really doing here is we're asking you, where's the data at? It's a legacy NAS. It's not a SoftNAS box. Okay, so we're saying, well, I should have a NAS out there at 18.14, and I'm going to try to connect to it with NFS. Oh, look, I found export pool 1 volume 1. That's where my data is. Okay, what we're working on in our next release of it is you're going to be able to select specific directory levels, not just like a whole volume as well, and be able to point to specific directories on the other side. But really what you're doing, and if you even look, this is a beta version. We've got a new video coming out for this. But net is you say, here's where my data is. Then down here, you're going to configure, you're going to say, here's what my data target is on the SoftNAS on the other side. All right. So then we're going to go down here, click that to say take it. Go down here and saying, on my target in Azure, I want it to be Azure Blob. Here are the storage account keys I need to create that remotely And this SoftNAS server here is now going to use that data to remotely configure the other side of the lift and shift. Makes it very simple. Once again, we run all the configuration checks. We verify that all the data you gave us for that step is valid. This step is really, let me pause that 1 second. All right. This is kind of giving you an update. I'm going from volume 1 here to volume 1 on the SoftNAS side in Azure. Continuous sync is configured. That continuous sync is so powerful just for one little checkbox. That's all you have to do to says, when I run this flow, don't stop it, let it run forever.
So I may have missed it in the GUI there earlier. How are you handling the encryption keys?
The encryption keys.
Yeah, like if you want it to be an encrypted volume on the target end.
Encryption could be said, you can either do the encryption through us, or the encryption can go into what we call there's a advanced mode, where you can actually pre-configure all the volumes and things like that if you want to use external encryption.
Okay.
So this is kind of the generic way that we can actually go in and just do our normal encryption.
So if I have my own KMS and I want to generate keys, I can then apply those to...
You'd want to call our SAs, because they've worked through some of that in the past, yes. I'm going to speed up here a little bit looking at the time. But net is once the flow actually starts, this is kind of the monitoring view. And you can come back in at any point in time and get into this monitoring view. And you'll start seeing a progress bar. Yeah, I did some editing there. It went from 2 to 59, okay? But what you'll see is this 80, 90 will hit 100. And then you'll see it'll pause and it'll go back to about 85. That's the continuous sync kicking in. It's saying that I'm resetting this flow to the 85% point and rereading the data. And I'm actually going to jump ahead to this point. What's happening in the background? And you get into our FlexFiles Architect, which is the NiFi editor. That UI I just showed you, it's building a NiFi flow in the background. Okay, and we're going to hit on that next. But really what it's doing is building out these processors and this data flow, and it is NiFi underneath the covers that's controlling all of this data flow. Okay, so what we've done is use the NiFi APIs to build a UI that simplifies setting up this type of flow. All right? The lift and shift again. Need to move data from point A to point B. Put in SoftNAS server, put in the SoftNAS server, run the wizard we just showed you, configure it up, allocate the storage on the target, press the button. It'll run forever. So again, compliance. Every time a file changes here, I'm going to move it over to there, off-prem, and have my backup copy. Now we're going to get into FlexFiles, okay? This is really going to start hitting on some new ground on what's going on. But same type of problem. The problem you'll see is kind of iterative, Got all this factory IoT data, business analytics data being collected all over the world. And again, how do I get it into a format that my application can actually use? So what we're transitioning into here is we start with ultra fast, make it go fast, right? Lift and shift, how do I make it easy to move it? Then you hit the next problem. Rick touched on this, so I'm not going to cover it. But NiFi is actually based on a 2014 NSA project where they open sourced it. We found it, said, holy crap, this is doing what we've been looking for this. Rick found it and started playing with it. It's now in production in our product. All right, let's reset the problem again. Broken record, but this is a very common problem. I got factories over here. I'm using an example here of IoT factories. Got a bunch of robots and they're dumping a bunch of bot data. Most people know what's happening with all that data today. Being purged. They don't know what to do with it. The analytics guy on the other side are saying, I need all that data. The guys at this side are saying, I got it, but I don't know what to do with it. There's millions of petabytes of data being thrown away because people don't know what to do with this scenario. And it doesn't have to be bot data, IoT data, but I'm using that as an example here. So let's expand our scenario again. We know how to get it from that remote factory in Indonesia, ultra-fasted, because I got a crappy network, right? I can set up a lift and shift flow that'll help me copy the data from where it is back to where the app is. Everything sounds wonderful. I got all this bot data all aggregated back right next to my application. The application guys think they have nirvana. And then they call up the DevOps guys. They say, hey, it's great, I got all this data, but my next problem, my app only understands JSON. You're sending me CSV data, you're sending me XML data. My app doesn't know what to do with it. Can you start a DevOps project to go figure out how to convert all this data? And number two, for the reports I'm running, I only need 50% of the data that you're sending me. You're wasting money. I'm getting these huge network charges because of the bandwidth that you're using and all the storage I'm using just to delete 50% of this. What can you do for me? Well, the DevOps guys been looking at NiFi, been looking at FlexFiles with SoftNAS. They say, well, really what you want me to do is filter the unwanted data, transform XML to JSON, transform the CSV to JSON. Does that meet your requirements? The app guy says, yeah, sounds like it. So he can either at that point start searching the internet for new third-party hairball pieces to bring in to their architectural dig, or if he's looking at what he already has with Platinum, with FlexFiles, with Lift and Shift, with NiFi, he's got a tool. This is where the power of what SoftNAS is building with the NiFi pieces integrated really comes to play and moves it from being we're a cloud NAS, where we have really flexible cloud NAS, to a data platform. You can see the transition on why we built ultrafast. You can't get the data there quickly enough, it doesn't matter. Why we built Lift and Shift, make it easy to get the data there. FlexFiles is that last mile we're working on. All right, so if you think about it like this, in a very high level, this is Lift and Shift. Got my data here, I need to get the data. NiFi has processors that let you get data. I need to send data, and I need to send it securely. NiFi has something called remote process groups, which are specifically set up for hybrid or cross-network secure transmission of the flow files, the data, when it's going outside of one NiFi node to another. NiFi gives you that. This is the stuff the NSA built. Okay, so I have to get the data, send the data, remotely, securely receive it on the other side, receive that data, put the data. That's what we did for our app guy, but it's not JSON. Too much junk data. So, flexibility of NiFi. You can go into the FlexFiles editor in NiFi. So I got 50% of the problem solved. I'm going to modify this flow, this data flow. I'm going to add into this section over here on the source, based on the requirements my app guy gave me, is this one of the files that he needs on the other side? And I'm either going to route that file into the bit bucket, the file itself stays here, but I'm going to take it out of the flow and say I'm not going to send it. So you can actually filter what data you send across the network before you send it, saving you bandwidth costs, saving you overhead and storage on the other side. So now I got all these files, and it's only the files that my guy wants to use. I'm going to hijack and put some more logic into the flow on the other side. I'm going to transform that data. So if I get a CSV file coming in here, I'm going to write an extended piece of this flow that takes the CSV file and morphs it into JSON before I put it. So what ends up happening, I only have the data that I want on the target side. It's all in JSON based on the schema that the app guys told us I wanted, and now he can run his app on all of the analytics data that he wants to use. Because I filtered the junk and transformed it on the other side.
So who do you see doing that? Is that your storage admin doing that? Is that your app developer guy?
Multiple. You're good, straight man. Set me up great. But really what it is a lot of this stuff is already canned and out there for you to use. Okay? It takes a little learning time, but it's a hell of a lot easier than trying to figure out how to code this from scratch. I could see DevOps people doing it. Very tech code savvy admins doing it. I could see you coming back and telling the SoftNAS professional services guys, I need some help with this. I could see working with our partners in doing this. And number three, there's a huge NiFi community out there that is willing to help. And it kind of goes back to the question over here earlier about setting up the community. As we build out a lot of these types of transitions, and I'll show you a video in a second, that's the kind of stuff we're going to share because it's not our IP. Okay, so I think depending on the level of technical ability, NiFi takes, I'll say about 2 or 3 days to get your head around. But once you get it, it's like, holy, this is simple. But you have to understand the framework, then you understand how powerful and flexible the whole environment is. So to that point, I'm going to show you right now a quick video of creating a CSV to JSON transformation. So how would you build this block right here? I'm going to show you what one of our developers did, because he's smarter than me, to actually fill this transformed data flow, or void in part of the flow. All right. So what we're starting off with here is, that's my CSV file. In this example, I'm reading it right off the local disk where NiFi is, but it could have been imported in from that third-party NAS that was part of the lift and shift, okay? So if you take that CSV file, and you know where it is, you go into SoftNAS and you start up FlexFiles Architect, which really embeds in the NiFi editor. But it also includes any of the proprietary processors that SoftNAS is built to include in the flows that you're building. This is how you go in to customize or build from scratch a data flow. Is this my water? All right, so the next thing you do is you actually start off with a processor, okay? And what a processor is the general building blocks that for each piece of a data transformation, this block does this unit of work, next block does this, next block does this. When you drag a processor in, NiFi will show you a list of all of the processors that are already built and can simply be plopped into your flow, so you don't have to build anything custom. In this case, I'm looking for a get file. The first part of my flow, I got that CSV file. I need to get it into my NiFi flow to prepare for the transformation. Mouth dry. All right. So whenever you add, forgive me, I need to click this or I'll lose my place in the video. When you add it in, it simply drops it on this palette. This is the WYSIWYG portion that Rick was talking about, drag and drop. Well, anytime you actually bring in a processor, all you have is I've got a unit of work here that knows how to get a file. I need to customize it. I don't have to write code, I just have to reconfigure the properties. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to rename it. Get CSV file. It's a get file processor. I'm going to call it get CSV file. Then you go into other configuration properties like the obvious one. Anytime you drop a processor in, what you're really doing is configuring that unit of work. What name do I want to give it? What are the inputs? What are the outputs? You know, where's the file at in this case? Okay? You think about the flow and where we're going. The next thing we want to do is set up the schema that I'm going to use to transform from the CSV to the JSON schema that I want. That's what this processor does. Okay? Now I've defined the schema that actually is kind of the brains behind the transformation. Now what I want to do is actually do the conversion, which will use the file, which is part of the data flow that we're working with. See if I can stop this without. I want to use the file that I read in. I'm going to use this schema to do the transformation. This processor here actually uses the schema and the data that's now traveling through NiFi world as a data flow, okay? As a flow file is what they call it, and I'm going to convert it, okay? And I'm going to let this speed up a little bit here. So the next thing that happens is while I'm working with a CSV file, my app expects JSON. There's a processor for me to modify the attributes that it's now a .json file. And then I want to put it, okay? So if you look at what's going on here, get the file, define a schema, use this schema to convert the data itself, that's your transformation, change an attribute because my file expects JSON, and put it. That's the transformation. That literally does what we were talking about in the previous slide. No programming required. All this stuff is in the box with NiFi.
Do you have customers running these types of transformations currently?
This is pretty new out of us. There are customers doing this, absolutely. In fact, we found this example on a YouTube video. That's how quickly we came up with it. So the last thing I want to show you is for every time you make a modification to a piece of that data in a flow file, in one of those processors, you can actually look at the output before it goes to the next block. You can start each processor or posit as you go. So one of the last things I want to show you here is what I clicked on was the queue between get file and put file. Excuse me, get file and transform. But you can actually go down and click this view button right here and literally see exactly what the data is that was either read in or what the output was along the way. And for every one of those transformations, there's full provenance data kept. So if you're running this for compliance or whatever, you can actually go back and see every step along the way. Okay? So I'm going to skip forward to this quick piece of data. These are the types of gets. The ... means there's tons of other ones out there. So you can get, as Rick said, from files, HTTP, Twitter, objects you can put out to multiple different formats. You can transform the data. There's tons of transformations already out there. You can write your own custom transformations if you want. And there's all kind of filtering. Route on attribute. You read data in, it looks at the attributes of that, and you can define multiple pipes out the back end. Extremely flexible, okay? And if you take everything we just talked about, and you could see how you start with ultra-fast, lift and shift, transformation, you end up with this type of power. Read in any type of data, route it. You know, do I want to get rid of it? Do I want to send it? You can add in scheduling, pauses, things like that to say when you want this flow to pause here before it continues. Securely transfer the data, route the data out the back end. It may not just be file. You may have a data stream coming over that has 3 outputs you're going for, and then transform the data before it's actually saved out for the application to use. So the flexibility of NiFi is huge, and this is what you end up having the potential of being able to do with SoftNAS Platinum and NiFi.